I noticed it the moment the music softened and guests turned toward the main table. On my wedding day, the main table had been replaced. 5 seats occupied by my husband's family, while my parents were left standing at the edge of the reception hall, holding their own gift like strangers. My mother's smile froze first. My father looked down at the floor, still clutching the speech he had written for me. Then his mother leaned back in her chair, lifted a glass, and laughed loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Your parents look poor," she said. "And my husband didn't defend them." He nodded. That nod struck harder than any insult. The crystal chandeliers above seemed too bright. Cutlery clinked. Conversation stuttered into silence. I could hear my pulse louder than the string quartet. I stood in a wedding dress I had chosen, believing it meant partnership, while the man beside me let my parents be humiliated as if dignity had a price tag. And in that second, the ceremony was over for me, even if the guests didn't know it yet. I watched my mother quietly step back so she would not cause a scene. That broke something cold inside me. I remembered who paid for half this wedding, who helped him clear his debts before the engagement, who welcomed his family when they looked down on ours. And I realized this was not a mistake in seating. It was a test, a public declaration of where my family ranked. His mother smirked as if she had won. My husband adjusted his cufflinks and looked away. They thought embarrassment would make me stay silent. Instead, I picked up the microphone meant for toasts, and as every face in that ballroom turned toward me, I smiled. Because in that moment, I had already decided the announcement I was about to make would ruin him immediately. I was raised by 2 people who never had much but never let me feel poor. My father repaired engines with hands scarred by decades of work. My mother sewed clothes late into the night so I could attend schools they never dreamed of entering. They taught me dignity was not in what people owned, but in how they stood when life tried to bend them. When I met Daniel, he admired that strength, or pretended to. He came from a family obsessed with appearances, country club manners, whispered judgments, polished cruelty disguised as sophistication. His mother measured people by watches, accents, and last names. My parents made her uncomfortable because they had none of those things. I noticed the insults early. Small things. She would ask if my mother still did alterations, as if honest work were shameful. She once told me I was surprisingly refined. Daniel would laugh it off, kiss my forehead, and tell me not to be sensitive. And I believed love meant absorbing disrespect quietly. That was my mistake, because looking back, I had been underestimated long before the wedding. They mistook my silence for weakness. Daniel mistook patience for dependence. His family assumed because my parents were humble, we would accept humiliation to preserve peace. What they never understood was I had spent my whole life watching people dismiss those who appeared powerless, and I had learned something dangerous from that. Quiet people notice everything. I noticed who borrowed money from me when Daniel's business was failing, who signed papers without reading them, who assumed I would never protect myself. By the time I stood at that microphone, I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was revealing a truth I had prepared for the moment they pushed too far. The wedding day humiliation did not begin at the reception. It began in fragments I had ignored. The morning of the ceremony, his mother entered the bridal suite, looked at the jewelry my mother had gifted me, simple. Gold bangles passed down through generations, and said, almost softly, charming, very provincial. The room went still. Even the makeup artist paused. I smiled as if I hadn't heard it. Later, during family photographs, the photographer arranged both families together, but Daniel's father stepped in and suggested my parents stand toward the side, where it looks balanced. Balanced. Such a careful word for exclusion. I saw my father hesitate before obeying. Daniel noticed too. He said nothing. At lunch, I overheard his sister whisper that my family looked like invited guests, not hosts. They laughed into champagne glasses, pretending refinement made cruelty invisible. Every insult arrived dressed as politeness. That was their skill. A hand placed too lightly on my elbow when steering my mother away from VIP seating. A pause before introducing my father to wealthy guests, as though translating him into acceptable company. Daniel kept offering me the same calm look, the one that meant, endure this for now. But each silence deepened something in me. I began watching instead of reacting, watching Daniel avoid my eyes when his mother spoke, watching his family exchange glances as if coordinating a private performance, watching staff quietly remove place cards from the main table before dinner. That was when unease turned to certainty. This was planned. Not spontaneous cruelty, staged humiliation. And the cruelest part was how sure they were I would swallow it. Smile for photographs, sign the marriage license, play the bride. They mistook composure for surrender. And while they kept performing their small insults, I was already deciding how public the truth would become. The moment everything finally aligned was almost ordinary. A server passed behind me with a tray of champagne, and I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. White dress, perfect hair, a bride surrounded by applause that felt hollow even before it fully began. Then I saw it. My father's chair had been removed entirely from the main table setup. Not moved, removed, like he had never been assigned a place at all. He was standing near the entrance, holding his folded speech in both hands, unsure where to go. My mother stood beside him, trying to smile through embarrassment, and Daniel's mother was watching them with quiet satisfaction, as if this was exactly how things were meant to be. I turned slowly toward Daniel. He was laughing at something his cousin said, completely untouched by what was happening in front of him. That was the turning point. Not anger, not noise, but clarity. Because I realized something simple. This wasn't disrespect I was supposed to endure for peace. It was a message, and I had already received it too many times. I reached for the microphone placed near the stage for speeches. No hesitation, no shaking hands, just a calm decision settling into place. If they wanted an audience, I would give them one, but not the version they expected. As I stepped forward, the room slowly began to notice me. Not as a bride, but as something interrupting their comfort. I didn't rush. I didn't improvise. That would have been their expectation, that I would react emotionally, say something reckless, and give them a clean story to laugh about later. Instead, I had already done my work quietly in the weeks before the wedding. When Daniel's business struggled months earlier, I had stepped in, not as a partner in name only, but as the person who actually stabilized it. I reviewed contracts he signed without reading. I corrected financial filings his accountant missed. I ensured his investors stayed calm when numbers didn't add up. And in doing so, I had access to everything. Emails, agreements, signatures, dependencies. What they never realized was that the respect they denied my family was being quietly offset by support they relied on from mine. My father's connections had secured one of their biggest suppliers. My mother's simple work had covered half the wedding tailoring when their designer backed out last minute. And I had documented it all, carefully, legally, without confrontation. Not out of revenge at the time, out of habit, preparation, awareness. So when they decided to humiliate my parents publicly, they didn't realize they were doing it in front of someone who understood exactly how their structure held together. I didn't need threats. I didn't need accusations. I only needed to make one announcement that would remove the illusion they were standing on. And I had already chosen the exact words. I stepped to the microphone with the same calm. I had practiced for years in rooms where I was never supposed to speak first. The ballroom didn't silence immediately. It softened, like a room realizing too late that something important had changed tone. Daniel looked up first, confused, then irritated, then uneasy. His mother smiled at me, still certain of control. I didn't look at her. I'd like to make a small clarification before we continue the evening, I said gently, my voice steady, almost polite. A few guests chuckled, assuming it was a toast. I reached into my clutch and placed a thin folder on the podium. I've been managing the financial coordination for this wedding, I continued, and also reviewing the recent restructuring of Daniel's company. That word, restructuring, landed differently in the air. I saw his father straighten. I saw Daniel stop breathing for a second. I kept going, calm and factual, outlining partnerships, dependencies, and signed guarantees, each sentence measured, each detail precise enough that only the right people understood the weight of it. No accusations, no emotion, just documentation. Then I paused. And effective immediately, I added softly. The agreements that allowed today's arrangement are being reviewed and withdrawn. The shift was immediate, not chaos, recognition. Guests stopped smiling. Daniel's confidence broke first, not loudly but visibly, like something inside him had finally been named. His mother's expression changed as she realized this wasn't a scene. It was consequence, arriving late but inevitable. The room didn't explode, it fractured. Whispers moved faster than footsteps. Guests who had been smiling moments ago now looked down at their phones, quietly checking names, companies, connections. Some stood up, pretending to leave for calls they suddenly couldn't ignore. Daniel's father tried to speak to me, but no words came out that carried authority anymore. For the first time, he looked unsure of who was in control of the room. His mother's composure cracked in small ways first. Tightened jaw, forced breathing, eyes darting between guests as if searching for allies that were no longer there. Daniel stepped toward me but stopped halfway. Whatever he planned to say didn't survive the silence I had created. My parents remained still at the edge of the hall. My mother's hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from realization that she was finally being seen correctly. Not dismissed. Reputation doesn't collapse loudly. It unthreads quietly in rooms like this. One conversation at a time. One reconsidered partnership. One shifted perception. That night wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about exposure. And in spaces built on status, exposure is heavier than punishment. People don't remember the exact words spoken at weddings like this. They remember who was in control when the illusion broke. And that is why it mattered. Not just to me, but to everyone who had ever been underestimated in silence. I didn't feel victorious in the way people imagine revenge feels. There was no rush of triumph, no dramatic satisfaction washing over me in that moment. Only clarity, quiet, steady, irreversible. When I stepped away from the microphone, I saw Daniel differently. Not as someone I had lost, but as someone I had finally stopped shrinking myself to fit beside. His world had always depended on everyone else staying silent. I had simply stopped cooperating with that silence. My parents didn't say much that night. They didn't need to. My mother held my hand a little tighter on the way out, and my father finally stood a little straighter, as if something long unspoken had been returned to him. In the days that followed, calls came, meetings shifted, relationships that once felt untouchable began to quietly dissolve under the weight of truth. I didn't chase outcomes. I let them settle where they naturally belonged. As for Daniel, I didn't hate him. I think that would have still made him important in my story. Instead, he became a lesson I no longer needed to repeat. What remained was something simpler, peace without permission. And for the first time, I understood that silence isn't surrender when it is chosen. It is power, waiting for the right moment to speak. Because in the end, I didn't destroy anything. I only stopped protecting what was never protecting me.